Hey everybody, welcome to Pastor's Perspective, sponsored by Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. My name is Brian Perez, and we are here live on this Tuesday, February 14th, Valentine's Day. We'd love to talk to you. Give us a call at 888-564-6173, 888-564-6173. We've got the phone lines open and ready to talk to you. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, the number's right there on the bottom of your screen. Use it. Call it, dial it, 888-564-6173. And answering your questions today, we've got Bobby Conway, the pastor of Image Church in Charlotte, North Carolina. Bobby joins us via the Bobby Cam, and you can also catch up with Bobby on his website, ChristianityStillMakesSense.com. Also joining us on Skype is Tony Clark, the pastor of Calvary Chapel, Newport News in Virginia. You hear Tony on the radio program called The Word Made Plain. And here in the studio with me is my church buddy, Pastor Brian Brodersen. He sat next to me in church this weekend. He probably wanted to make sure that I wasn't, causing trouble or anything. But Pastor Brian, it is good to have you back in town, too.
Well, thank you, Brian Perez. And yes, actually, security asked me if I would sit next to you because they've been a little bit worried about some of those outbursts of, you're just so expressive these days. It's
dancing in the aisles and barking like a dog.
All that wild stuff.
Yeah, can't do that. Swinging from chandeliers. Yeah.
Hey, great to see you guys.
Welcome back, bro.
Thanks.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm back from the land of the frozen, and
yes,
it's but I'm still cold. It's cold. Mm-hmm. It was cold in Europe, and it's cold in California. It was an entirely different kind of cold in Europe. It was like 10-degree cold, which is
that's really cold.
Pretty rough.
Oh,
yeah.
And this is like 58-degree cold, but it's still cold.
It's still cold. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
but we can deal with this.
Yeah. So how you guys doing? How's the East Coast of the USA?
It's been nice.
Been good?
Yeah, it's been nice. Today was about 58, the sun out. So that's a beautiful time. Tomorrow, and I think the next day could hit 71 or so.
Wow.
So, hey, I'm not complaining at all.
Yeah, I heard we had a couple of those days when I was gone, too. So any, UFOs or anything flying over your place? I leave the country and I come back, and on CNN they're saying, well, no, we don't think these were extraterrestrial, but we can't be sure. So the news is now talking about alien invasion. Mm-hmm. Who would have ever believed it?
Just so they don't actually have to talk about what's really going on. Now they're going to say, oh, yeah, it's just UFOs. That's what it is. Yeah.
Well, that's going to be one of the excuses when the rapture occurs.
Yeah.
So that's going to be one of the excuses. So we got to start getting the people caroused about these things now. So when it occurred, they'll say, remember we told y'all, alien invasion. And so, it's normal stuff.
So, there's lots of things that I want to talk to you guys about, actually. I came in here knowing we have to answer questions, but also wanting to ask you both a number of things. Have you guys heard about the what's happening at Asbury College in Kentucky?
Yes.
So what do you think?
I think it's a revival that sparked there. It was the same thing happened during the Jesus movement. A similar thing. I saw video footage of what was going on during that time. Edwin Orr, did his reporting on that during that time, and it seems like a similar thing is taking place.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I concur. It's exciting.
Somebody reached out to me from the UK today asking if I wanted to, be interviewed or write an article about it. And I said, well, I'm not there. I can't really speak for what's going on. But they were asking they heard about this happening in 1970. And so they asked me about it, and I said, well, look, in 1970, that was kind of the, that was kind of the epicenter year of what we call today the Jesus People movement. Jesus People revival. So, I think that was connected. And it's really interesting, though, how much within the Christian community, how much debate there is over what's going on and if it's really legit and if it's, we should pay any attention to it or if we should just dismiss it. It's just emotionalism or, is there some hidden danger that's going to come out? So we have to really watch and see where it goes. And to me, it just sounds like a bunch of young people got together and they're worshiping the Lord for consecutive days. And I'll tell you, anytime that happens, I think you would have to say the Spirit of God is moving, no doubt, in some way.
You have to go there. Young people worshiping God like that. Consecutive days. You got to say God is involved, because we have so many years of examples of true revivals. We have something to compare it to. And it has the same elements of, especially the one that took place in 1970, has very similar, components to it, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so here's the other thing, and it's kind of connected. It just seems there's all kinds of ways currently that Jesus is getting sort of put front and center in the culture, and so there's news about this. I don't know how far outside of the Christian community this news is spreading, but I'm thinking of three things. I'm thinking of the Super Bowl and the He Gets Us ads that were run during the Super Bowl game. And then I'm thinking of course, The Chosen has been around for a while, but it seems to be getting more and more people seem to be interested in that show and, being influenced by it, being impacted by it. And then there's the coming of the film, The Jesus Revolution, which is going to be out here very shortly. And I saw today, I think it was Kathy Laurie posted Kelsey Grammer on the Jimmy Fallon show talking about the Jesus Revolution, and Jimmy Fallon showed a clip from it.
Whoa!
And I'm thinking, okay, this is some pretty cool stuff, That, and then with the Super Bowl, and with the young guy that had the cardiac arrest on the field a few weeks ago, and the guys kneeling and praying, and the subsequent conversations about God's intervention and healing him. In the midst of all, this is my point, in the midst of all the craziness that we're living with, it just seems like there's a surge of Jesus stuff, however you want to describe it, that's coming into the culture, which I think is a pretty great thing.
Yeah. I think it's a tremendous thing. Anytime, I remember back in the day when the commercials for the Super Bowl were like 500,000 for 30 seconds of a commercial. And then a couple of years ago, it was up to about 2.3 million or so for and then for this these Jesus commercials to be front and center, I was blown away by that. And I was very thankful that it was front and center. So I think the Lord wants to do another work. And I think he's trying to stir our hearts and get us fired up, and because God works in us both to will and to do his good pleasure. So I think God wants to do it. He wants to stir us up to get to praying for what he wants to do again. And so I'm excited about it. That's what we've been praying for here. I want to see the Lord do it here, what he did out there in Southern California so long ago.
Yeah, Bobby, what do you think? You're awfully silent.
It's tough because I never really know how to jump in and speak. So I just wait until somebody asks me because there's a delay.
Oh,
so
right. Yeah.
I'm not the guy that just jumps and initiates because I just wait for one of you to call on me because otherwise that delay thing just makes it all funky.
Yeah.
In the studio, it's a lot easier to read, but I don't know if I'm behind Tony or ahead of Tony or what. So, I think what you both are sharing is wonderful, and I'm hopeful as well. I was thinking about the Asbury revival, and I've seen a couple of Craig Keener's posts that have been, encouraging. He's like, whatever you want to call it, this is not normal.
Yeah.
And I think that is very true. They're seeing signs of revival, and my prayer has been that it would spread and that we could be the recipients of it. Because honestly, there's been such a darkness on our culture. It's honestly at times just hard to imagine a return to passionate gospel living from the culture, like where there's a massive turn. What we've seen with the new atheism and then progressive Christianity, and it's just one thing after another of LGBTQ plus, the pronouns. I just feel like we've been hammered for 15 years now.
Yeah.
It would be so encouraging if God would hear the hearts and prayers of these young ones and let us see it again, because you have these moments where, you're talking about remember when, and you don't just want to remember when, you want to experience it now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. I think also with the Grammys and and the whole Satanism stuff that's just blatant now. Satan is no longer hiding. He's just going to come out and do what he's doing. And definitely what encourages me is that when the Bible says where sin abounds, grace abounds much more. So sin is abounding. So I'm counting on that grace to abound much more.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, good. I think.
Yeah. So you're seeing, in some ways, Tony, that's a good point. You take what Brian shared, that there's a lot more Jesus front and center, but Satan's even becoming more front and center.
Yeah.
There's a showdown right now going on, and we just got to know that in the end, as it's been said so many times before, Jesus wins. But hopefully this will be a great time of revival. I would love to see. I would love it.
Yeah.
When I experienced that revival back in Bible college, we had the same thing that was happening like at Asbury. It went on for several days. And I remember thinking, will I ever encounter the Lord like that again? And I mean, I just saw something so beautiful, and I've never seen anything like it. And that really, for me, is the only time in my life where I've seen this continued, unbelievable, unquestionable aspect where people were calling our campus and sending students out to different places. And then you couldn't even get the service off the ground where our students were going. People were falling on their face and confessing sins, and all that went on. And then it was kind of shut down by the faculty. Looking back, I mean, they were skeptics. I think that they had an administration to run, and we wanted a revival to be experienced.
Yeah, can't let God get in the way of that stuff.
Right.
That's the important.
Right. I was just telling our church this past Sunday how I'm very thankful that I caught the tail end. Pastor Brian would tell you, I caught the tail end of the Jesus movement in the 80s. It was at the very end where, churches were filled and people were getting saved every Sunday. The worship music, new music was coming out all the time. And it was just, we used to say, all you have to do is open up your garage and put a sign that says Calvary Chapel, and you have an instant congregation. And that's just how it was. God was moving. Everything was easy. When revival is taking place, everything's easy. You preach the gospel and folks just come forward flooding the altar. And I caught that. And I was telling our church this Sunday, I said, there is nothing like being in the midst of God moving. Mm-hmm. And I just want to see God do it here on the East Coast.
Yeah. And, the Lord is moving, and let's just see. I think all of us, not that we need to have the same exact type of experience that they're having at Asbury, but but Lord, however you want to do it among us, have your way and move. And I'm encouraged just to see the Lord working and drawing people to Himself. Just being in Europe last week and hearing the stories about what God's doing in Germany and in Hungary and in Italy and France and Spain and places, and you just, there's some good things that are happening all over the world. Yeah. And, so thank you, Lord.
Amen.
So people are hearing this conversation and they've been reading about what's going on, and they're wondering, should I buy a plane ticket and go to Kentucky so that I can experience this revival that's going on? Can we experience it here anywhere? Yeah. Or do we have to go to Kentucky? Is the Lord only moving there right now?
Well, it's funny because there are people that are doing that. There are people that are, driving or flying or whatever and going there. The one thing I would say is that, there's definitely something unique happening there that's probably not, it's not happening here in that kind of a way. Can you go there and have the experience and then take it back or whatever? I don't know. I know a few people that have gone, that are going, and these are people that are already very much in the vein of wanting to see revival, preaching about revival, thinking all the time about revivals in history and all that. So I think for them, it's like, wow, I think this is what I've been hoping for and praying for and dreaming about. So I'm gonna go check it out. I think if you can do that, if you want to do that, I wouldn't say there's anything the matter with it, but I think why not just also stay home and say, Lord, you can come here much easier than we can get there. So just do. Yeah. The Lord's here already. If you want to turn up the burner here, then we would love to experience that.
Yeah, Tony.
Yeah, we have an example of it in history. There was a guy who was a part of the Anson Street revival in South Carolina, and when God moved in a great way at that particular church down there, he left to go up to Fulton Street in New York in 1857 and started the Layman's Prayer Revival, where they began to pray at noon that God would move. Sure enough, they started praying. Revival broke out. That revival of 1857, it was so powerful, it turned the tide of the Civil War that later came on, because no longer did they see blacks as slave and property. They began to see them made in the image of God and needed to be saved, and it changed the tide of the Civil War. So it had happened.
Bobby?
Yeah, I would say what we can definitely look for with the mark of revival, though, is confession of sin, repentance. That is definitely brokenness is a part of revival. So again, I've talked about the idea that Reformation precedes revival. So if Asbury is experiencing revival, then reformation of their hearts, reformation around theology, like God's not going to bring a revival out of just debauched living and doctrinal heresy. That's something else. And I know that there's been movements where people talk about, hey, God's showing up, God's doing this. I go, well, whatever you want to call what's happening, people are experiencing something, but I don't want to say that that's God, because it's marked by a lot of heresy and debauchery. But I do think where you find sound theology with humble, contrite, broken hearts that recognize that God is holy and that we're not, and we're confessing for forgiveness, then he shows up in that kind of environment. And so when you see good theology coupled with brokenness for sin, repentance with prayers pleading for God's mercy, and then the testimony that he has shown up in that, that's pretty exciting stuff.
Tony?
Yeah. The 1949 revival that took place on the Hebrides Islands in Scotland, that is a perfect example of the brokenness that people felt as the pastors began to pray in the barn for months on end, and then God just show up. God said, "Are my hands clean? Is my heart pure?" And God just came down and just rock the people. 11 o'clock at night, 600 to 700 people are at the church there crying out on the side of the road for mercy and that for forgiveness. They piled into the church, and then another 600 or 700 out on the streets, just repenting on the side of the roads. So that sort of thing is what happened during revival. That 1949 Hebrides revival is very memorable when it comes to what you're talking about.
Is there a resource that talks about all these different revivals? Would you guys recommend something like a book or something that talks about the different times in church history? Yeah,
there's some great resources. One of the classics is a book called Revival by Martin Lloyd-Jones. I'm not totally sure that it's still in print, but and Tony mentioned J. Edwin Orr. I have a book that I wrote years ago called Consuming Fire. That's a bit of a talk on revival, and I included in that an appendix from J. Edwin Orr, where he kind of walks you through the history of revival in the U.S. And but that book, I think, is probably out of print these days. There it is, Consuming Fire. So a lot of it is very dated, but the portion that I mentioned that I included by Orr is, it is what it is. It's not going to change. It's just it's a historical record, basically. Yeah.
So you can get that book, Consuming Fire, on Pastor Brian's website, backtobasicsradio.com. And the other books we mentioned, Revival by Martin Lloyd-Jones. And what's the book by J. Edwin Orr?
Well, there's a bunch of, he did a bunch of books on the topic of revival. So that's kind of, well, look at that. There's one called Campus Aflame. Wonder which one that one is. He's probably highlighting some of these things that happened on university campuses. So
All right. Here we are on Pastor's Perspective. Give us a call, 888-564-6173. Bobby or Tony, did you have anything else to chime in on? No?
I think the last thing that I would just say is I'm glad you asked about books. And I'm glad, Brian, that you instigated the conversation, because, in some ways, I just find myself going, I need to go back and do some of this reading again, because back in college, I just remember that fervency that you're praying for it. I feel like in many ways, I feel like my own heart could use some revival, to be honest, just from the standpoint of we've been beat up so much by watching so much apostasy. It's taken a toll, I think, on a lot of us, and it's not that I don't believe that God can do it. I do. At times, I've just thought it looks like we're just the Titanic, and we're under the judgment of God, and we're sinking. And I just been kind of preparing my heart to get ready to suffer persecution in this culture, to be honest with you. So that's been kind of a war mentality for me. So now to hear, oh, wow, there's a school experiencing revival, I find myself going, oh man, God, maybe me of little faith, that would be really wonderful. I would welcome that, and I think I could use some revival in my own heart because, man, I'm just got the apologetics gear on. How do I equip this congregation to understand all the ideas that are coming our way? How do I get us for war mentality? And I'm like, Lord, if you would just show up, that would just really be nice, and I would love that. And reading some books on revival could stir our hearts. Maybe telling churches that we pastor a revival story each week, like Tony was doing. And
you know, the thing that we I think often forget is that revival, and let's expand it to awakening, you know, because revival tends to refer to Christians who are kind of sleeping, waking up. But then awakening refers more probably to the culture at large, where people are being awakened, you know, to their need for God. But historically, when you see these things that we call revival or awakening, they're always preceded by really dark days. They're, you know, where just everything is falling apart. You know, it just seems like, you know, like everything's kind of just, this is it. There is no, there's really no hope. There's no future. And then God steps in and does some extraordinary thing. And that has been one of the amazing features. And even if you think, when we think back to the Jesus People movement in the 70s, sometimes we look back on those days with so much nostalgia, you know, the 60s and the 70s and all the flower power and the great music and everything. But man, the culture was insane in those days, you know, it just completely, and I think the parallel, we're living in parallel times, very similar times today than what the world and the nation looked like in 1968. The world looks like that in 2023. So, come on, Lord.
You know, the thing that I would say that makes me hopeful, though, I mean, I love that it's happening on a college campus. The part where I could get discouraged is I guess I haven't known what social media and the internet age has done to like the Gen Zs. So I read recently only 25% of Gen Zs even go to church. So if you think about the future of America, well, there it is right there. Unless there is some kind of a movement. But I really do feel like it's time for these young kids that are Christians, any of the teenagers listening right now, find your posse, come out of the closet, get bold for Jesus, because there's so much fear in these young kids of being canceled. And we need some young leaders to stand up and be bold, because everybody else is being bold about their sin. You got people dancing on stage at the Grammys, you know, in Satan garb. I mean, it's time that we do come out of the closet and be unashamed for Jesus and recognize that people are celebrating evil in our culture. I mean, that's the part that's so crazy. I mean, it's a celebration of sin that is just so unbelievable. We are calling evil good. And now the new people that are guilty, it's the Christians. We're told we're guilty. We're told that we need to get saved from our oppressive ways. And if we don't wake up and get some kind of revival, man, the future doesn't look good. So do it, Lord.
But here's the good thing to remind ourselves of, that, you know, just thinking of your past, Bobby, you were just a incorrigible, out of control, you know, teenage guy who was just, you could find a bunch of parallels
A reprobate.
to you today, all around. And look at you now, Dr. Bobby Conway, And Tony was the same way, and I was the same way.
Yeah.
And God just reached down and plucked us out, and
it's a good word.
He can do it again.
Yes, he can.
Yes, he can.
That's right.
One more book to recommend. This one, John Huang sent this one in, our good friend John. It's called A God-Sized Vision, Revival Stories That Stretch and Stir. That's by Colin Hansen and John Woodbridge. All right, we're going to take a break, and then we'll get to your calls at 888-564-6173, 888-564-6173. It's back. What's back? Pastor's Perspective, sponsored by Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. Brian Perez here, along with Brian Brodersen, Bobby Conway, and Tony Clark. And we've got the phone lines open at 888-564-6173, though every line is full right now. Praise God for that. We'll try to get to as many calls as we can before 4 p.m. Pacific time. But one more thing we want to talk about, right, Pastor Brian?
Yes, and then we'll do a lightning round, right, with these calls. So, Tony, this is for you. I wanted to ask you a question about, of course, I've been out of town all month, so I'm a little bit late to the game here. But I want to ask you about Black History Month. And, of course, this is Black History Month. And we hear a lot about it here and there. Some people are very happy that we do have a Black History Month. They think it's an important time of reflection for us. And other people are not so happy about it. They wonder why. Well, why do we have to do that? I mean, why don't we do a history for everybody sort of a thing? So I want to ask you what your feelings are about a Black History Month as a Black man, and depending on if you're for or against, what are you doing? What are you doing with Black History Month?
Well, one thing is it's very sad that we even needed to have a Black History Month because of the omission of Black contributors to American history. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of things that were contributed by Black people were overlooked, or it was credited to white people And so Black History Month was established to bring some highlights to the contributors of blacks to American society, from the traffic stoplight to the gas mask to the inventions, go on and on. So, but you know what I've noticed in the last, I would say let's say 3 years or so, Black History Month is now been looked down upon, it's been now downplayed, or it's been marginalized in the sense that all we see now during Black History Month is a bunch of Martin Luther King Jr. Movies, or something like that. Nothing significant. They may play the movie Roots or something on that. It doesn't go too much more than that. And what's unfortunate now, we're even seeing less and less of those things. And now for us to even talk about Black History Month or Black History period, the Trump card comes out, as in playing cards. The Trump card comes out of critical race theory. So now for us to even talk about Black History Month, there's what's being yelled back is critical race theory. So now for us to even bring up history, is now being looked down upon. So I see a lessening of the emphasis during February of anything Black in the culture. I see it now diminishing in a great way.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. That's sad. And I don't disagree with you. But I do think that there are still not everybody's gone that way, and I think that there are more. I think there are more people also that are aware of the importance of Black History Month, and people that are talking about it in good ways. Maybe than there was in the past. So. Excuse me. I agree with you. Like you're saying, there's more negative in the sense that because everything today is CRT or woke or anytime you talk about anything, and then that accusation comes. And so that's a reality. But I think on the other side of it, I think there are others who have come maybe over the past 3 to 5 years to a new appreciation or understanding of the importance of Black History Month, and are happy to engage with it, and so forth.
And so what's unfortunate is those who have come to some sort of light or some sort of understanding, they're being called woke now. Yeah. Now you're just labeled as woke. It's just like, okay, you're trying to sympathize with those who are crying out about something, and now you're just considered woke. And so that immediately shuts those people down or cause those people to go into a type of closet, a type of Joseph of Arimathea, their disciple, but secretly, So it's almost like that kind of thing. Like in private, I really agree with you, but in public, they're going to keep quiet because they don't want to be labeled as woke or canceled from the Christian community as being woke or whatever, So it is very, very unfortunate what I'm seeing today, and it caused a lot of even Black people to just not even speak about it because they instantly get labeled and won't be invited to things anymore and won't be accepted anymore. Friends no longer wants to be friends anymore, and so a lot of that has gone on from the perspective that the circles I've been in.
Yeah, Bobby.
Man, I think what you said to kick it off, Tony, that it's in one way it's sad to even have to have a Black History Month from the standpoint that a lot of African American history has been omitted, and that's tragic. I would say having a heart to do a church where we're diverse, and we're diverse in ethnicity, but in all ways, socioeconomic, age. But I would say there is some truth that I can feel where maybe white people in the community, and they hear we're doing diverse church, and they get concerned that, am I saying we're going to be woke or CRT or anything like that? And absolutely not. That's not the heartbeat here. We're not CRT. We're not trying to be woke. And even the African Americans in our church would adamantly, say that they're not CRT. So on that side, it is unfortunate. But I can say I think there are people that are certainly more open to hearing it, and it makes perfect sense. Like, I heard the narrative years ago where you'd hear Black History Month, and then you would hear the statement from white people going, well, why do they need a whole month, speaking of the African Americans, to celebrate? And, when it's said just like that, white people are thinking, what's up with that? And then all of a sudden you start learning why, because, well, how would you like to grow up in school where you never had any history of the influences and the contributions of white community? It makes perfect sense to me now. I celebrate Black History Month. I'm thankful for Black History Month. It's sad that the influence has been diminished, and I'm so thankful for my African American brothers and sisters out there, and that God's bringing about unity. But isn't that just like the evil one to get in there and get this CRT in the way when we have an opportunity to really do some beautiful things in the name of unity?
Yeah.
Yep. Well, in just pure gospel fashion, we move forward in the grace of God. I mean, that's the thing. I was thinking a little bit about, I was thinking about CRT, critical race theory. And there are numbers of Black Christians who have not embraced critical race theory, but they recognize that, there are some things that critical race theory concludes that are actually accurate. You can observe them, you can see them in society and so forth. And they, many have felt sensitive about CRT because, Christians would say, sometimes white Christians would say, well, what do you need CRT for? We have the Bible, and that's enough. We don't need to bring in some outside philosophy, especially, a philosophy that's not rooted in Scripture or whatever, and all of that's true. But then the response from sometimes, a Black person is, well, yeah, but we've had the Bible for a long time and nobody seemed to pay attention to what the Bible was actually saying. That didn't seem to make a difference.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a great comeback. They got a good point there.
Yeah, they do. Very good. We've been at the Bible.
Yeah.
And so, but let me just say this before we rapid fire these questions. I am where I am today. We know by the grace of God. We know by the Lord Himself. But Pastor Brian accepted me in to Calvary Vista at the time, where I always tell the story. There was only 5 Black people at the entire church. My wife and I were 2 of the 5. And he accepted me in and loved on me and then brought me on staff and did all this. And so because he had a heart, for all people and especially for Black people as well, he made me feel welcomed to be in an all-white environment. I didn't feel weird. And he made me feel welcomed and loved. And I am where I am today as a result of the love he showed to me. Because one of the things Black people do is that wherever we go, first thing we do is look around to see if there's anybody else around who looks like us. And then when we see somebody, we say, okay, it's safe for us to be here. Pastor Brian accepted my wife and I in, and as a result, here it is 30 plus years later, I'm sitting where I'm sitting, right now as a result of that.
And that's just the love of Jesus, right? I mean, that's really, if we really don't need any outside philosophies if we just do what Jesus said to do.
Yeah.
That is
What a concept.
Yeah.
That is, what a concept.
Yeah. The Good Samaritan is called good. He wasn't good. He just did the basic requirement of the law, which is love your neighbor as yourself. Mm-hmm. And so if we just, as the song goes, love God and love people, I think the church would be different. Mm-hmm. And it'd be totally different in the world today.
Mm-hmm. We'd have revival.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
Yes.
Okay, one more thing.
Yep.
One more thing. Gee, I've been gone, and I've had all these things swirling in my head, and I'm thinking, I want to get back to my friends and talk.
You could
about
have called in last week or something.
I could.
We would have answered your questions online.
Yeah, the time zone
Could
was
have
too
put you on
messed up.
Skype or something.
Yeah. One last thing, and I think this happened. I think Sunday, I was sitting next to Brian Perez in church. And listening to Pastor Char preaching, and he was, he was talking about a number of things, but he was talking about kind of the response of Christians in the culture a lot of times to the things that are happening around us and so forth. And sometimes, the responses aren't the best. And anyway, his point was, he said, I think that a lot of times it's fear. We're reacting in fear to certain things, and because we're fearful, we're not really acting the right way. And I just said, and this is my last thought. I just thought, if there is one group of people on the entire planet that ought to be able to keep their head, to keep their cool, it should be the church. The church should be the place where people are looking over and going, why are those guys so cool? I mean, why? How come they're not losing their minds? Why are they calm? Why are they not all riled up and agitated? That's the way it should be. Because if we're believing the scriptures, and if we're trusting God, and if we're believing that the moments that we're living in are overseen by the sovereignty of God, we can chill. We can just say, hey, you know what? The Lord's in charge, and we're right. And I think I just keep coming back to this idea, if we just kept our eyes on what Jesus is doing and not be so preoccupied with what the rest of the world is doing, which it's always done throughout all of human history, how much better off would we all be?
It's interesting, too, Brian, you use the word cool, that the church is cool. Yeah. But a lot of times people think, I want to go to a cool church. And it's like, well, no, that's not what the definition of a cool church should be. It's what Pastor Brian just mentioned.
Yeah.
That's
having a cool head. What is it? Is it the NIV that translates? I think, when Paul says to Timothy,
that sounds familiar.
Paul says to Timothy, and the NIV translation is, keep your head in all circumstances. Don't lose your cool, is what Paul is saying to Timothy. Mm-hmm. And you think, man, yes, amen.
Tony?
Yeah, that's exactly what you're describing is what George Whitefield described coming over on a ship. They were in the midst of a storm, and the storm was raging. Everybody's kind of freaking out. He said that there was a group of people that was really cool.
Yeah.
They were at peace. They were singing songs, and it was the Moravians.
That's right.
The Moravians were just there, had the peace of God. They were singing hymns and praying, and they were cool.
Yeah. And they were the ones who ultimately led John Wesley to a saving faith because of their coolness, because he was freaking out. He was an Anglican priest going to evangelize the colonies, and he was scared to death that the ship was going to sink. Yep. And the Moravians were like, hey, what's your problem? If we sink, we're going to be with Jesus.
That's true.
And if you want to watch or listen to Pastor Char's message from this past Sunday, you can go to the Calvary Chapel Costa Mesa website, cccm.com, go under Teaching, and look for the series through the Gospel of John, and then look for the one from this past Sunday, which was February 12th. 888-564-6173. I'm going to do a Facebook question really quick here. Zoraya sent this one in. I'm struggling with my mom, who just moved into my house after yet another fight with another roommate. I am my mother's only child, but she does not respect me. She speaks very foul to me. She's aggressive and does not know boundaries. I'm trying to be a good Christian daughter, but she is affecting my mental health. What is the Christian thing to do? We get along fine when we live apart. I pray God will help me find a suitable solution. Brian, what do you tell Zoraya?
Wow. Yeah, I mean, that's tough. I don't think that you have to subject yourself to that kind of abuse. I think, you ought to be able to say to your mother, who's now your roommate, hey, Mom, this is not the way we're going to do this. We're not going to live like this. I'm not going to let you do this sort of stuff. And you're welcome to be here if under the right circumstances, but I'm going to set the standard, and this is how we're going to live here. And if you don't want to do that, then you're going to have to live somewhere else. I think that's a perfectly reasonable way to approach it.
Zoraya, thank you for sending in your question on Facebook Messenger. Bobby or Tony, did you want to add anything to that?
No, don't touch that one.
I mean, I do think that that's important to be able to establish some boundaries.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, to the phones we go. Here's Tyler in California. Welcome to Pastor's Perspective, Tyler.
Hey, guys, can you hear me?
Of course.
Thank you so much. So my question is more oriented towards being a father and a husband. So I wanted to know, what is my duty as a father and a husband and as head of household to lead my family? Specifically, what I'm getting at here is, should the man be the authority in the relationship? What I mean by that is, it's written in text where, husbands submit to their wives and, women submit to their husbands. So I guess I was just trying to understand, if I feel like my family, if my wife is making a decision that is, not in line with what God is promoting us to do, or if I feel like my children are making a path choice, right, for their life where, hey, this isn't godly. What is my duty? How far do I take it, and to what extent? Am I passive with praying for an outcome, or am I active with being a voice about telling them what it's wrong and just trying to live possible? So, wanted to get your guys' perspective on that.
Tony, what do you tell Tyler?
Tyler, I think that it's a little bit of both. I think that you have to be active as the head of the home, but you have to be a loving shepherd king in the home, where you're a servant leader in the home, not a Rambo or a caveman kind of do it my way, I'm the head of this home. No, none of that. You have to lovingly lead your family, in the ways of God. And especially if you see your family or making decisions that are not biblical, that are not right, you to lovingly show them according to the word, this is how we do things. And so as they're head of the home, you do a little bit of both. You do leading by verbally sharing the word, as well as behind the scenes praying.
Bobby Conway?
Yeah, those are good words, Tony. It's never going to help to say, hey, look in the Bible right here, I'm called to be the head of this household. Yeah. Or, submit to me. That kind of language will only tighten up her spirit. In the same way, like if you worked for a boss, the boss has authority over you, but a boss that has to kind of remind you of that or say that or do that, that's ultimately an insecurity in the boss's part, right? So it should just be recognized. So for example, when I'm with Brian, I can joke with him, I can have fun with him. He's my friend, he's my mentor, but he's also my boss. So that means that, what he says goes, and I have to understand what that looks like. But he doesn't have to say, I'm your boss, or I'm doing that. And if he is ever saying anything like that, it would just because he's so goofy that he's having fun joking in that way.
Hey, Bobby, say, I'm your boss. Now, you said enough.
That's right. Yeah, settle down now. So it's like in the same way, like in the church where I serve, people would report to me, but I don't want to walk in a room and make them feel any way, nor with my wife. So here's what I'd say. If you're in this situation then where you feel like, man, I feel like I'm supposed to lead my family this direction, but I can't seem to go that way because my wife's wanting to go another direction. It really would be good to ask her lots of questions like, hey, I can sense that we're at odds about this. Or even if you're talking to your children, I can sense that you're at odds with this. Ultimately, we know that God would want us to be unified, going the same direction. And I realize that maybe I might be missing something. Is there something behind why you think it's so important that we go this direction, or why we don't go this direction that I'm saying? What are your thoughts there? And really, I think when we try to listen, ask questions, validate, and then I would say, can we set out that it would be good for our marriage and it would be good for our home if we could paddle in the same direction? If we could figure out how to do that, that would be good. So let's know that that's our goal. And then how can we get there? And if listening, repenting, whatever, I think all that could be very helpful.
Tyler, does that help you? Does that help you, Tyler?
Sorry. Yes, it does. I guess I just wanted to know, if we were at an impasse, it does make sense to ask a lot of questions to kind of find the deeper root of why the question is being asked or why they're trying to make that decision. That's what I was trying to get to, was if my wife and I or my son or daughter were at an impasse, how do I go about doing that? Is the husband the final authority?
Brian?
Well, I mean, I'm assuming that your children are children, not adult children. So, of course, if that's the assumption, then yeah. I mean, there is a place, and I think everything that's been said is great. And I've done this in the past. I've learned through experience it doesn't really work. Like because I'm the boss, that's why we're doing this, or that's why, or God's put me in charge. This is what He told me to do. So you just need to get on board. That never. I mean, you might get your way, but it's going to relationally, obviously, mess things up. So you need to do the wise thing, the gracious thing, the Jesus thing. But there is also a point sometimes where you just have to say, okay, well, I understand all of these things. I'm sympathetic, but this is what we have to do because I am the person that God has given this position of leading. I'm to lead my family. And so I'm going to do that. And sometimes it's not always going to sit well with everybody that this is the direction we're going. When I moved my family to England back in the 90s, had I taken a poll and said, okay, kids, what do you think? They would have said, Dad, you're crazy. No, we're not going. So I just had to say, guess what, kids? We're going. And we did. Yeah. It was good. Yeah.
Tyler, thanks for your phone call today on Pastor's Perspective. We have run out of time. Everybody on hold, sorry that we couldn't get to your call today, but we had lots of great conversation. Today's program will be archived on Facebook and YouTube and Spotify a little bit later if you missed any part or want to review it. Steve, Renee, Chris, Mike, Martha, everyone else, call us back tomorrow. God bless you. Pastor's Perspective was sponsored by Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa.